My name is Renee Kirby. I'm the parent coordinator at Maryland School for the Blind. And here today I have Bob Fonte. Is that how you say your name? He's the director of outreach from the ARC in Baltimore. And he is going to present on transition for adult services. So I'm going to let him do the PowerPoint that he's brought today. And if you have any questions, if you, I guess you can just, since we don't have any participants right now, hopefully we will have someone join in, but you can always go to the website and find Bob's contact or anyone else in the ARC that you feel like you need to contact. So.
Do I use that arrow to change?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Good morning. So I'm going to talk about transition and some of the adult services that are available through the Developmental Disabilities Administration and other agencies. There we go. So one of the first things people always ask me is, when should I apply to various agencies? So the main agency to apply to is the Developmental Disabilities Administration. They're the large state agency that funds most disability services. It used to be that there was no urgency to apply, in that DDA didn't do much for children, but in recent years things have changed regarding that. So school systems, I think in the IEP say that, or in their guidelines say that at age 14 they should start talking about it and should be applying to DDA. That's what they advise the families. I used to tell families at 16 because one of the key things DDA looks for when they're determining eligibility is your independent living skills. And a 14-year-old or a 12-year-old or a 10-year-old wouldn't be expected to have many independent living skills. So often their eligibility, was an issue at that point. So at 16 or 17, you're should be developing those independent living skills, and DDA could make a more accurate determination of your eligibility. And because there wasn't services for kids, it didn't really make any difference, but that's changed recently. So one of the things to keep in mind is DDA has two eligibility categories. There's what they call SO, or supports only, and full DDE, or full developmental disability. Maryland is the only state that has that I know of, that has the supports only category, and that's a partial eligibility category. So that means either that you are fairly independent, you have a developmental disability, but your skills are on the higher end of that, or that your disability occurred after age 22. So that's a confusing category for some folks. So for instance, if someone is in an automobile accident at age 20 and suffers a severe brain injury and are severely disabled, they would be eligible as DD. Someone who is 24 and has the same injury, same accident, they would only be supports only eligible, no matter how severe the disabilities are. And that's the state law.
That makes sense.
So yeah, so there's nothing you do about it. You can't appeal that, or you're not going to go to court and win that, because that's the law. And I guess the reason for that is that it's supposed to be developmental disability, and the definition of developmental disability is it occurs before age 22, because it's a developmental disability, as opposed to Social Security disability eligibility or other benefits like that. Okay. The problem with the supports only category is that you are eligible for some limited support services. You're not eligible for day services. You're not eligible for full residential services. You can get some support services in theory, but the practical situation is that you're not going to get any services from DDA, because the state cannot get matching federal funds for that. So they make that the lowest priority. So if you're supports only eligible, you probably are not going to get services from the DDA. So that's really key when you do the DDA eligibility. If you're determined supports only eligible, to understand why, and if you can, appeal the determination. What you want is that full DD disability. That means you're eligible for the full range of services. You're eligible for all the priority categories that become available, at all the initiatives through DDA. So that's really key. So applying to DDA is very simple. If you go on the DDA website, Google DDA Maryland, you'll see the information. You'll see an application in English and Spanish. You print the application. It's a big, long application, but it's not complicated. People call me all the time and say, I need help filling out the application. It's mostly check boxes. check the county, you check the disability, you check some of your independent living skills, like what you need help with, what you're independent with, those sort of things. The key thing is to send documentation of your developmental disability. So most of the folks involved in this webinar are going to have kids in school or recently out of school. So they should have plenty of documentation to send in along with their application. As recent as you have, I have seen in recent years, DDA sometimes say we need something more recent, but it really depends on the disability. I mean, if it's a disability like blindness and Down syndrome, which aren't going to change, it really is not that critical. Some things that are, autism or other disabilities that, you may, by interventions and therapies, do better and become more independent, that they might want to see something more recent. But you send in what you have. I've seen, and it's certainly people at 50 or 60 can apply to DA, never win the system. They're not going to have any recent documentation. But if it's good enough to justify the eligibility, you'll be okay. Sometimes it's actually beneficial to send older things, especially if you're talking about like someone who is in the high end of the intellectual disability spectrum. IQ scores vary, plus or minus 5 or 6 points. So if someone has a 68 IQ, depending on the thing, they might want to, sometimes it's better to send some earlier ones that show that consistently you've had that scored in the 60s and that was on the higher end, or for someone that develops mental health issues. So DDA does not consider mental health as part of the disability determination, and actually it complicates things, because if you have a mental health issue in addition to a developmental disability, DDA tries to determine how much of your need for assistance is based on your developmental disability as opposed to your mental health disability.
So you could only get like a certain percentage?
Well, not a certain percentage, but they're trying to understand that your developmental disability is severe enough to make you eligible.
Okay.
So, often it's the combination of your disabilities that make your functioning, that determines your functioning. But DDA is trying to pull out the piece that is associated with your mental disability.
Okay.
So, fortunately for most students, many emotional disorders start after they're out of 18 to 20, young 20s, after adolescent years. So often you'll have some good documentation, educational assessments, psychological evaluations from the earlier years before that was prominent, that you can justify the developmental disability piece.
Okay.
So sometimes it's better to have some older documentation.
Right.
So that's a key thing to know. So when you are applying to DDA, you send in the application and whatever documentation you have. You can always gather more in the meantime. DDA, when they get the application, is only going to look that you have enough documentation that you likely are eligible or could be eligible. And then they will send somebody out to interview the person. So that the initial application, you can always provide more documentation at the interview or send it in later. So, don't let that hold up. Don't try to gather, like if you're applying for Social Security benefits or whatever, you probably want to get everything you can gather, to present at one time. With DDA, if you have enough, you have an IEP, a psychological evaluation, a medical report, send it in with the application. And then in the meantime, if you get other stuff, you can always provide that. So don't panic about the application process. They are going to come out and interview either somebody from the DDA directly will do the eligibility, or they contract with 4 nonprofit agencies. There's 4 in this region. In the central region, I don't know the numbers in other regions. There's usually more than one now. Used to be only one. So there's one called Service Coordination. There's one called Total Health, one called OHI, and one called MARS. So they come out, they're going to do what they call a comprehensive assessment, and it's really just an interview, and they're going to ask the person and or the family about the independent living skills. Can they feed themselves? Can they cook a basic meal for themselves? Do they understand money? If they're, depending on their age, they're going to ask geared questions toward those. So that's one of the reasons I say if you applied age 4, you certainly can, but they're going to have a hard time asking, you're not going to be able to answer those questions because the 4-year is not expected to manage money. But so they're kind of interpolate that the disability is severe enough that they won't be able to at age 18. So that's where it gets a little tricky.
Okay.
But if say someone is like going to be exiting school in the next few years, they're 18 or 19 years old, they're going to they should have a lot of those adult skills, and that's what they're going to ask. Can they take public transportation on their own? Can they go to the community store on their by themselves? Do they understand they're supposed to get change? Those kind of things. And this is the one time that most parents are proud of their son or daughter, and they want to say, oh yeah, well, she can do this, she can do that. This is when you want to point out their negative, their deficits, because you're trying to make them eligible. And so if they can go to the store, and I've seen a lot of people determined not eligible or only partially eligible because not all of the interviewers are going to be expert at like digging deep into understanding what the needs are. They're going to ask the basic questions. So for instance, if somebody can go, like I've had somebody that I helped appeal that actually got full DD eligibility, but initially in the interview, they had said, the mother had said, oh yeah, he goes to the store for me and gets a few items for me. I have trouble with my legs now. He can, do certain, he helps me around the house, all the kind of things that he can do. Well, the point is he could go to the corner store, but he didn't cross a major street. It was right at the end of his block. They knew him, so they didn't take advantage of him with money. He didn't really understand the change. They gave him it because he knew the mother 5 houses away. He gave a simple list, and if he had any trouble with reading it, the storekeeper would help him. That's a lot different than him getting on the bus and going to a major store, or even they might be comfortable in an environment that they're really comfortable with. Some people have said, yeah, I go to the doctor on my own. The doctor's in the neighborhood, but he's been going to the same doctor for 25 years.
Right.
So if he had to find a doctor or go to in a novel situation, he wouldn't be able to manage. So, point out that he can do his own laundry, but it took me 6 years to teach him to do it, and if he had a different machine, we'd have to teach him all over again. That's the kind of things you have to point out, because you really want to stress their need for assistance and additional support in this situation. So just in general, so you'll send that in. They'll interview you, and then it'll be several weeks probably, and you'll get a letter in the mail. And the letter will say one of 4 things. It'll say, you're not eligible. We need more documentation. Your support's only eligible. That's not what you want. Or you're full DD eligible. Assuming you're full DD eligible, you're done. That's all you do. With the eligibility determination letter, you'll get another letter that'll say you need to pick your DDA case management agency. And it's the same 4 agencies I just mentioned: Service Coordination, MARS, Total Health, and OHI. And it'll tell you to fill out this form and send it back to DDA, and then they'll assign someone from that agency will become the term is coordinator of community services now. It's changed a couple times over the years. The more common term is resource coordinator. But they're going to be the one to help you access DDA services now that you're eligible. So if you're DDA eligible, you'll get a case manager through DDA, you're good to go. That's their job, is to help you. It doesn't mean you're going to get services right away. It means you're eligible. That's a big difference between eligibility and a priority for funding. But at least you're over that first hurdle of eligibility. So if your child is 4 and they're eligible as DD, you're good. You don't have to do anything.
My daughter actually was eligible
As DD.
Yes, and she had a service coordinator in service coordination, and she was in high school. They did a psychological evaluation. Her IQ was right above the level that they accept, and she was terminated from.
I've never seen that ever. How would, once she's eligible as DDA, I've never seen DDA request a redetermination. So why would DDA even know? Who did the psychological evaluation? The school?
Someone here, yeah.
But why would DDA even get it?
I can't remember the exact details.
Okay.
But I just remember it basically cut off services for her through DDA. She still qualifies for SSI, and because we were applying for the LIS funds,
right?
And they were helping with respite.
Okay.
When she was younger, and up until high school, basically, she really was not capable of totally taking care of herself throughout the day when, in the summertime when I was working. So they helped with that.
So you sure she was DD eligible and not supports only eligible, but could get LIS funding and other state only money?
Yeah, maybe she was supports only.
Yeah, but what I'm thinking is that she was probably supports only, and in previous years, maybe up to 4 years ago, or 3 or 4 years ago, you could get some services as supports only.
Okay.
And actually in recent years, I've seen a few people get it, but it's usually a real emergency situation, and usually there's court involvement or some sort of pressure on the state to fund it. Okay. It's not that you're not eligible for services as supports only, you're not a priority for funding from the state. So in theory, you could get services, but DDA is saying we have limited services, and if you're DD, we get federal matching funds. So we're going to put all our eggs in that basket and not make anything available for supports only. It's not that you can't get services.
We had a very committed service coordinator.
Yeah.
She was amazing.
So I'm thinking that she probably never was DD eligible, and when they got the new documentation to try to make her DD, they said she is only supports only. You didn't win the appeal.
Yeah.
That's my
Okay, that's probably what
guess what happened. Yeah. So one thing, so if you're DD eligible, you don't need to be proactive and let them know she's made a lot of progress. That's no
Right.
DD. It never comes up again. In Social Security, if you're eligible for like Social Security benefits as a child, at 18 or 21, they're going to have you reassessed in most cases. So they are going to ask for additional documentation, but DDA doesn't do that. So if you're DD, you're good to go. If you're supports only, you can appeal. And part of when you get the eligibility letter, it'll be like 10 or 12 pages. The first two will be about the eligibility. The next are about your appeal rights.
Wow.
So you can appeal. So there's a couple of different ways to appeal. You can just provide additional documentation to that resource coordinator or DDA who did the interview. And they're glad to incorporate that into the report or, share it with DDA. So that's the easiest way. And often there's some, like I said, went back and got some older psychological evaluations that justify that the one that you had was the higher end one or whatever the reason is, or more documentation from the doctor or whatever. So you can provide that. That's not really an appeal. That's just you're providing more information. Then there's then a more formal appeal is that you send in the papers that have requested an appeal. Usually they want to see something additional. They don't just just send the same stuff and saying pretty please. Now you want something additional that you think is going to support your case. And the first step is they would have an administrative hearing at the DDA headquarters with somebody from the DDA headquarters making the determination. Then there's a more formal appeal. It actually goes to an administrative law judge. The office is in Hunt Valley, administrative law judge, whatever. And you go before them, and DDA will have an attorney, and you have a right to have an attorney or not. And then the judge will make the decision. Yeah. I mean, I've represented people, and that's not good.
Also can get emotional, I think, sometimes.
Yeah. And it is a real court procedure. Like I had to do it one time, and they were because the person had no one, and they were saying like I had a witness, and I answered for the witness, and you can't say that. You have to follow real procedures, right? You have to ask them leading questions. You can't ask leading questions. All like you see in the court dramas, right? Exactly. I numbered the pages wrong that I presented to the judge for evidence, and she got mad at me. So it's not good.
Created a whole climate already before it even happened.
Yeah. So hopefully you don't get to that point. DDA is willing to look at other documentation. So you get additional documentation, or some people have actually paid to have a new evaluation done. That's not inexpensive, but sometimes if you're under 21, you can get it done through medical assistance. But so hopefully you can make the case to get them supports only. One thing that has happened that's changed recently, I would say over the last 10 years, DDA, if a child was under the age of 14, there was a whole window. They weren't supposed to do this, but DDA was making, in the central region, there's 4 regions in the state. Baltimore and all the surrounding counties are the central region. Then there's the Eastern Shore, Cecil County, and down to Salisbury. And then there's PG County, and then Western region. So in the central region, I can only speak the central region. Anyone under 14 that was applying, unless they were like severely disabled, we're never going to make any progress, were determined supports only eligible. And that was a disservice to the people. That was wrong. It didn't really matter 10 years ago, because you didn't get services as a kid anyway. You were technically eligible for services, just like in supports only, you're technically eligible for services, but DDA has very limited funding. It's only as much funding as the state allows each year. And they're saying there's other services for kids. There's educational services, there's DSS, there's all kinds of services for kids. There's nothing for adults but us. So we're going to put our limited resources for adults only. So there really wasn't much for kids. So if you were supports only eligible, it didn't really matter back then.
So even more kids now, probably, because they can save lives.
Yes.
And there were all the preemies that were born, and the people that had the issues, the babies that were born with issues, they didn't have the knowledge to be able to save them. And now there's an abundance.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's funny. Baltimore has some of the best medical facilities in the country, right? So they're saving people that wouldn't have made it years ago. But things have changed. So DDA has now said that they're not doing that any longer. As long as you can document, again, it's still a little tricky when you're looking at adult skills in a child, but they're supposed to be looking at the disability and not just the age when determining supports only versus DD. So that's a good thing. And now there are services. Kids under 21 can get services from DDA, and DDA, there's actually a whole couple of initiatives for that. So I used to tell people, don't worry about it. When you're 16 or 17, call DDA and say you want to be reassessed, and they would send somebody out to reassess you, and it wouldn't be a big deal. And then if you could document you were DD eligible, you get it. And then, you really weren't expected to get services until you exited school at age 21, so it wasn't a big deal. But now it's even more important that you're DD eligible because there's services that you can get. So I think that's about the eligibility. So that's applying to DDA. So you can apply at any age. I've seen people that had, diagnosed as Down syndrome or genetic syndrome at, 3 weeks of age or whatever, and they called me and said, "Can I apply?" And I said, "Sure." Now DDA might determine them supports only eligible, but that doesn't hurt. You can always appeal to DDA. Okay. So that's not a big deal. It's not like you blew it. I got supports only. I can never overturn that. The other thing, as you're getting closer to exiting school, that to apply for is Social Security benefits. So I always tell folks, if they haven't gotten it before age 18, that's the time to apply. Social Security looks at family income before age 18. Once you're 18, they only look at the individual's income, even though they're still living with the family and they're dependent and they're still in school. Doesn't matter. They only look at their income and assets.
Right, and they also look at, they ask questions like, is this student paying rent?
So there's two things. So for eligibility for SSI, there's two Social Security benefits that people get. There's SSI, so supplemental security income. For that, you have to be poor and you have to be disabled. So you're disabled enough that it impairs your ability to maintain gainful employment. So at 18, your son or daughter can apply. You can apply for them on their own at 18. They look at his income, but not the family's income. And they also look at assets. The asset limit has been the same for 35 years, $2,000. So that's not much. So if you have lots of families are doing the right thing. They're trying to save money for their child's future. Grandmom is giving them money. You're penalized.
Bonds, I know, bonds.
Yeah.
They totally penalize you for that.
Yeah. So so there's two things to do. Anything, even if you have like a almost anything, life insurance policy that has cash value. So if it's one of those, I'm not a life insurance expert, but if you have life insurance where only if you die you get the benefits, the paper burial, that doesn't affect you. But if it has a cash value of whole life, I think they call it. So you can cash it out. It's a $100,000 policy, but it's worth $5,000 now. That's $5,000 an asset. So you can't have money in your child's name. Now you can always have it, or for many years, in what they call a special needs trust. It can't just be any trust. It has to be a special needs trust, which means it protects. It's worded in a way that it protects those assets from counting towards Social Security benefits. So the problem with special needs trust is you have to have an attorney set that up, and it's expensive. So if you're trying to, grandma wants to give her $5,000, you don't want to pay $3,500 to an attorney to set up the account. That's the problem with the special needs trust. It's a great system if you know that they're going to get some money or inherit some money when grandma dies. Special needs trust is a great way to go. Right now, in the last maybe 3 or 4 years, there's a thing called a pooled trust in Maryland, which is a way for smaller amounts of money to make sense. So it's an attorney manages that trust. It's based out of Columbia, Maryland. And so I can put $3,500 in there in my child's name. Renee can put, $1,800 in her name. And there's fees involved, but it's much lower. It's in a pooled trust, but it's managed independently. I mean, it's your money that you can pull out like a special needs trust. Okay. So it's relatively new to Maryland, but that's a good way to be involved with smaller amounts of money and have a special needs trust. Well, no, the attorney is through the special needs trust. They manage it. That's part of that. Oh, okay. Yeah. So you're not doing a private attorney.
So you're using that.
If you Google pooled trust in Maryland, pooled like P-O-O-L-E-D, like the money is pooled together in one pot. And there is an attorney that manages that. So that's another good way. And now the newest thing is the ABLE Act. So the ABLE Act is maybe 2 years in Maryland. So it's kind of like a college savings plan for your child with a disability. So you can put pretty much unlimited amount of money. I mean, there's a certain amount per year you can put in there, but it's very high. And it also protects the assets from eligibility qualifications. So that's a way to save money too. And they're making some tweaks to it. But you can pull money out for certain things. I don't think it's as flexible as a special needs trust where you can, the trustee can say, well, I'm going to, send John to Hawaii with his sister, whatever, you can use it for anything. There are some guidelines in which you can use the money for, but it's pretty flexible. And I think that you can, if say the person with disability dies, you don't lose that money. You can roll it into like another child's college savings fund or something like that. There's some things that I'm not an expert on the ABLE Act, but
we did Maryland ABLE.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did a webinar. There actually is a webinar about that whole thing on YouTube. So
that's the key thing. So you got to think about that when you're applying for Social Security. $2,000 is a very small asset. Now they don't count, like furniture and belongings. They only are going to count bank statements. They're going to ask for tax records if the person has paid any taxes for the last 5 years. They're going to ask for bank statements for up to 5 years. So for that person. So there is no look back for like if a senior's trying to set up a trust to protect them from going into a nursing home, you have to go back 5 years. You can't give the money to your kids and then expect the state to pay for your nursing home thing. You have to wait 5 years. DDA doesn't work that way. So if you do inherit money, you can have time to put it into a trust and then you'd qualify for Social Security benefits right away if you're otherwise eligible. So, they're not trying to deny you, but it is for people, SSI is for people with very limited assets. I mean, that's the law. Disability and just too disabled to work gainfully and your limited income. If you're eligible for SSI benefits, you automatically meet the criteria for medical assistance and Medicaid, which is even more important than the money in a lot of cases. Mm-hmm. So Maryland calls Medicaid as the federal term, Maryland calls it medical assistance. It's the exact same thing. So if you met the criteria for SSI, you're poor and disabled, you automatically meet the criteria for medical assistance. So it's handled, it's not administered through Social Security. You still have to go to Department of Social Services to apply for medical assistance. But if you have SSI and you can show that, the SSI award letter, you'll automatically get it. So that's a big important thing, and you'll need to have that. That'll help streamline things when you apply to DDA or trying to access services for DDA. What Renee had said earlier, most dependents who are under age 21 do not get the full benefit. The full benefit now is $755, I believe. And because they say you are subsidizing their care, they're still living with you. So they give you a partial eligibility, like a 2/3 that your son or daughter will actually get. So maybe $580 or something like that they may get. Now you can charge them rent or have some sort of system. There's a couple of ways to look at it. A lot of people do that at age 21. They start getting the partial thing, and when they're 21, you say, he's out of school now, I'm going to charge him rent. He's going to do this.
There are some limitations with that.
Yep.
You have to have a bathroom, full bathroom that they have use of, that's next to their bedroom or in their bedroom. I'm trying to remember what else.
Well, there's two ways you can look at that. You can make that determination. The easiest way is to say they're going to pay their fair share of the living expenses. So if you have 4 adults living in the home, you can say divide all the major expenses by 4 and then say they're going to charge their fair share. Problem with that is $755 probably doesn't cover a lot of that. So they're going to say you're obviously subsidizing because his fair share would be $900 and he doesn't make that much.
Right.
So that's the easiest way if you have a limited household expenses, like that. But the other way is like a fair market value. That's where you're saying you're renting a room in your house and you have to follow like the landlord type of things, right? That you send access to a bathroom and some use of common space percentages. There's a formula for that. So you should try to get the full benefits if you can. I mean, it's not that much to begin with. But a lot of folks, I recommend at 18, get what they take in, and as they're 21, leave school, go back to Social Security and try to make the case for the full amount of money. Often though, Social Security, if they were determined eligible at 16 or 17, DDA will probably want to redetermine them anyway at age 21, just make sure they still meet the disability criteria and the income criteria. So a lot of families, so they get the benefit, they went through this hard work of getting Social Security benefits for a child. Often they had to get an attorney involved. Social Security denies, I think, 85% of the people the first time they apply. And then you can appeal. Appeal just means kind of like the DDA appeal. You provide additional documentation.
Sometimes they request you to go to their doctor.
Sometimes they'll send you to their doctors, which, you know,
Crazy.
that's crazy. But
Especially
sometimes,
if your child goes to Hopkins.
right.
You know, and they're seeing a
Exactly.
specialist and they want you to go.
So sometimes that's actually good because they don't have good. Sometimes they'll refer you for like a psychological evaluation with their doctor, and you can't. They're expensive, so if you can't afford one or can't get one on your own, that's a way of getting it done for free. So sometimes it's helpful to have it done. Sometimes it's too like, and I have expert doctors. Why are we relying on theirs? So it depends on the situation. But once you've done that, and now that they're getting benefits, they got medical assistance, they have SSI, and you're actually in school, and now we're talking about work programs. Families always panic of, am I going to lose, if he works, am I going to lose my Social Security benefits? And there's two kinds of Social Security benefits you can get. You get, most people that are exiting school are going to be getting SSI. The other benefit, SSDI or SSA, the same thing that everyone gets when they retire or they're as an adult and they become disabled, and your letter from Social Security you get every year says, if you retire at 64, you'll get this amount. If you retire at 67, you get this amount. If you became disabled this year, you get this amount. That's all the same pot of money. They call it different things depending on how you become eligible for it. So if I hurt my back and can't work and I become disabled, I'm going to get Social Security disability insurance. If my wife gets it on I die and my wife gets it on my record, then she's going to get like survivor's benefits. So it's all the same thing. Well, disabled adult child can get benefits off their parent's work record when the parent dies or the parent becomes eligible for Social Security themselves. So when a parent becomes eligible for Social Security, a disabled adult child would be eligible for benefits from the parent's work record. Often that's much more than SSI. So you don't really make that determination, Social Security does. But if a parent, but just be aware of that. But as most kids exiting school at 21, their parents aren't going to be on Social Security, so they're probably not going to be. They're probably going to have the SSI. And you can get both. If your SSDI is less than about $800 a month, or $830 probably, because they subtract 20, and then if you subtract $20 and it's less than $755, you get the difference.
Okay.
So if you get both, it's probably going to average about $770. So just keep that in mind. But often SSDI is much more. It could be $1,100 or $1,200 a month, depending on your parents, how long they work. And you can get it. Lots of people that have disabilities get it on their own work record. They've worked and paid into the system, and then they qualify on their own work record. So, so just some things to keep in mind. But work affects Social Security benefits for the two completely differently. SSI is what most people are going to have coming out of school, $755. People are like, I don't want him to lose his medical assistance. I don't want him to work. I've had this conversation with many families. There's lots of work incentives built in. Social Security wants you to try to work. They want you to try to reduce even if you don't get off of Social Security, they want you to try to reduce your reliance on Social Security.
And it's good for people to work.
And it's good for people to work. So this is one good thing the government did right. They're trying to get you to work. So there's lots of work incentives. There's the basic, it's pretty simple. They don't count the first $85 you make every month. And then for every $2 you make, they reduce your SSI $1. So for instance, if say you get a part-time job, your son gets a part-time job making $485 a month, they're not going to count $85. They're going to say he has a $400 income per month, earned income per month. His SSI is going to go down $200. But he came out, they lose $200, but you're bringing home $485. So you're $285 ahead.
Right.
And then you pick up some more hours and make another $100 a month. Your SSI would be expected to get in $50. So it's a straight formula like that, and it goes month to month. So it's always months behind. So,
right.
but if then they get laid off, they would get the $755 back. If they pick up more hours, it would go down. So
now, is this with? How do they know this? So do you have to continuously keep in
yes,
contact
that's
with
the
them?
one negative. If you have a job, especially with your income changes every month, it is a bit of a pain. You have to send in the pay stubs.
Okay.
So if your son is getting Social Security benefits and then they start to work, it's your job to contact Social Security and say, my has a disability, but they got a job through an agency or whatever. They can be, but you should be able to mail it in. You know, you don't have to go in an appointment every month. You mail the subs in.
Okay.
The key thing, if you basically understand DDA, Social Security is never wrong. So
Right.
even though you reported this and they never reduced the 755 for 3 years, they're going to say you still owe it.
Mhm.
So it's up to you to realize they should have reduced this, the basic formula I just gave you. So put that money aside and just say they're going to ask for this back at some point, and they will. And then I've seen people with $33,000 overpayments, and then they take it out of your Social Security, so you're getting almost no Social Security for many months. So it's up to you to report it, but as long as you understand the basic formula and you're in the ballpark, you'll be fine. We have a lot of people that work full time through the ARC, and now that minimum wage went up to 1010 or 1015, whatever it is now, their monthly income brings their SSI benefits down to zero. And the parents are panicking. A lot of them don't show up for the last week of the month of work because they don't want to lose their SSI completely. They don't lose their eligibility. If they would lose their job, they would get it back.
Okay.
Just because it goes down to zero doesn't mean you've lost the eligibility for the benefit. It just means you've lost the benefit because your income's too high. So if you're
Disability makes you eligible.
right, if you break your leg and you can't work for a couple of weeks and it goes down, you should be able to get that money back. You're still eligible. And the other thing people are panicked about is that medical assistance. If I lose my SSI, I'm going to lose my medical assistance, which is even more important to a lot of folks. Pays for the medication and all their other medical expenses. So if you lose your Social Security solely due to work, your SSI solely due to work, you should be able to keep your medical assistance. That's another work incentive because they know that Social Security knows that that's a big reason people don't work full time. So you're eligible to keep that in many cases. There are limits, but it's pretty high. And then if you're in a DDA waiver, another thing with why it's important for Social Security to get eligible for Social Security and medical assistance before they exit school is on the DDA application, you'll see that it says you must apply for medical assistance in order to apply to DDA. Doesn't mean if you don't have it yet, you can still apply to DDA. You can be determined eligible. What they really mean, and it's worded poorly, is that you can't get services from DDA until you apply to DDA. So the way it works, it's kind of backwards with DDA. So the way most folks become eligible for service from DDA is when they exit school at age 21, there's a special program called the Transition Youth Initiative. So when you have that resource coordinator and you're going to be eligible for services, a priority for funding, not eligible, but a priority for funding coming up, the service coordinator is going to work with you to enroll you in one of the DDA waivers. And the DDA waiver, what they are doing is waiving the normal eligibility for medical assistance. If you already have the medical assistance and SSI, the process is streamlined. The federal government's already determined that you meet their criteria. So there's a fast track. They're not going to ask for tons of records and financial documents and lots of records for that. If you don't have SSI, they're going to ask for 5 years of tax records, 5 years of bank statements, medical reports, all kind of things to apply. And it's going to be a big, long process to determine you're eligible for the waiver, which is going to hold up your services. If you have SSI and medical assistance, you're halfway there. So that's another key thing to do. So as I said, so assuming that you're in one of the DDA waivers, the income cap for medical assistance is 3 times the SSI amount. So 3 times 755 is like 2265, something like that. So that's the monthly income that you can earn, even though your SSI would be down to zero and still not even have to worry about your medical assistance going away. And then even after you lose it, say you make more money than that, there's a way to buy into medical assistance called EID for very affordable. Like the one guy I know who's just over, he pays like $25 a month, and another guy pays $75 a month. So there's lots of work incentives for Social Security. So don't let that, you want to apply and get the benefit you deserve or you're eligible for, but that should not be a factor in your decision to work or not. The only thing I'll say about SSDI, I'm not going to talk about SSDI, but that works completely differently with employment. You either get it or you don't. You don't get a partial payment. And DDA determines if you're doing real simple, you can work as much as you want for 9 months, not necessarily consecutively, and they don't count that income against your SSDI. You still get the full amount. After that, they look at if you're doing what they call substantial gainful activity, which is pretty much earning about $1,200 or $1,300 a month. And if you're earning more than that, they're going to say you don't qualify for SSDI and you'll lose it. So that's different, because that's like what I would get if I hurt my back and they're saying you can't work. That's why I get it. Now I'm earning money. They're going to say, well, you can work. You're making money. So that's the difference. So SSI is a need-based program. SSDI is like Social Security insurance for disability. So that's the different understanding of that, but completely different eligibility criteria, and how it's affected by DDA. So we talked about services I talked about DDA historically hasn't done much for kids. In recent years, they've added what they call low intensity support services, and that's what Renee mentioned with LISS. So that is, it's supposed to be a one-time only money, but I think you can get it more than 1 year. They've made some changes to it. But it's a cap at $2,000, a $2,000 limit, and it's a lottery system twice a year.
Yeah, you can apply every year.
You can apply every year. Okay. They've changed the criteria a couple of times due to, they've improved it. I was going to say that. When it first came out, it was terrible. So they're out of money the first 2 weeks. So they have two lottery systems twice a year. So you apply. It's a pretty simple application process, but it'll pay for a variety of things: adaptive equipment, camp, therapeutic services, lots of different things, up to $2,000. But it is a lottery system. It's really for people who are on the waiting list, waiting for services and not getting other services. So not in the waiver. So that's something that anyone that's on the waiting list can get. So now it makes sense to apply early, and get eligible. Another state agency that I'm going to talk a little bit about is DOORS, Division of Rehab Services, and they only do job stuff. That's their only mission. But they have a new service the last couple of years for students called PREETs. And that's something that anyone that's in school with an IEP can get. But I'm first going to talk about the new DDA waivers. So the other things, so I actually said you can actually get not just LISS, but actually DDA services. So there's a new waiver called the Family Support Waiver. There's a cap of $12,000 a year. It's actually $12,500. The DDA is saying we got to allow for cost of living or something. I don't know. They did say limiting it to 12,000, even though it doesn't say that. They're supposed to target 400 families per year to get those services. It can be one-time only, like adaptive equipment, or it could be ongoing services like respite camp. You can have an annualized budget with if you're eligible. Now, you have to be eligible and on the list. I'm not sure exactly what the criteria is for that. You have to been on the list for a number of years in a certain category. But all you can do is get your son or daughter eligible for DDA services and on the waiting list. And then if they're eligible for one of the family support waiver or one of these waivers, the resource coordinator will contact you and say you might be eligible for funding this year. Here's some of the, let's talk about it. So you don't need to worry about this. Just know that this is one of the reasons that you should get on the list now. There's another, the family support waiver is for persons with disabilities under age 21. Then there's another new waiver called the community support waiver, and that has a higher cap, $22,500, can be one time only or ongoing. There's no age limit, and there's another 400 families who are supposed to be accessing that. Now that is, a lot of the transition youth will put into that waiver. So folks that graduated under what they call the Transition Youth Initiative went into that, were put in that community support waiver. The Community Pathways waiver was the only waiver with DDA for many years, and it's still the biggest waiver. Most folks are in the Community Pathways waiver. And really what that means, you don't really need to understand what that means, except that it means the state gets federal dollars to provide the services. So in the past, and many years ago, before the waivers, it was all state-only money. So, whatever the legislation advocated for, allocated for DDA every year is how much money DDA had to spend on services. That was it. Then with the federal waiver, the Medicaid waiver, the state gets about 50% of that money back from the federal government. That's why they push, you have to be in a waiver to get services, because it's a 50-50 split. DDA has a waiting list. It's based on priorities, not like the order your name was added to the waiting list. So it's not like the housing authority or a deli where you're like, next is getting it. It's not that way. It's based on priorities. Usually they look at if it's situations of crisis. When the money's tight, and it varies year to year, depending on the economy really, is how much money the state allocates to DDA every year for new services. Could be like your mother has to die or go. I remember years when you could only get services when like your mother died or went to a nursing home. There was nothing out there. It has to really be pretty urgent. One pot of money that is usually protected and how most folks get into services is something they call the Transition Youth Initiative. And DDA almost always, or the state almost always, fully funds the Transition Youth Initiative. The Transition Youth Initiative is only for kids exiting school at age 21 and are DD eligible. So to be eligible, you need to be exiting school at age 21. You're eligible for funding to get into services from July 1st following their last year of school through June 30th the following year. That doesn't mean services end then. You have all that time to get into services. Once you get into services, like a job program or day services, it'll continue. As long as you get funded in that window, that's when you're eligible to get funding. Once you're in, it'll continue indefinitely. But that's your window. So if your kid exits school in June, you're not really eligible, even if you find a provider to start before July 1st, but you have 365 days to get into services. And then you lose your eligibility after that. So if you're not hooked up with a provider by June 1st the following year, you're just on the waiting list again. There's not really any. So you must be DD eligible. You must be willing to enroll in the DA waiver, but that's for all services. And you don't have to do that. The service coordinator will do it. If your child is in their last year of school, usually in February, the service coordinator will be working with you on waiver paperwork to get it in, because it's only good for 6 months, and they're assuming you're going to be getting into services like in July 1st. So usually February is when they start talking to families about that. Can be traditional services or self-directed services. There's three generally. It can be employment services, day services, or personal supports. Personal supports is new. That didn't used to be an option. But it wouldn't pay for residential services. Transition youth is a specific pot of money. It's really made for day and supported employment services for folks. And DDA usually fully funds that, but I remember one year it was cut in half at the last minute. And we're down in Annapolis every spring advocating that it's fully funded. And one year, there's usually 300 people in the Baltimore City and County that exit school, and 120 got funded. So the rest didn't. So it's not guaranteed. If you exit school before age 21, you're still eligible when you're 21, as long as you're DD otherwise eligible. But there's a window where you don't get anything. You might be able to get door services, but you can't. You can't get DDA services. You're not eligible as a transition youth then. We talked about if you're eligible for DDA services, you'll get a case manager. I talked about the 4 coordinators of community services. They'll assist you with the waivers. For a TY, this process will start in their final year of school. I thought you said waiver application not submitted for February. And then a provider can't do anything until they're eligible for the waiver. So that's why I said if you already got Social Security, SSI, and medical assistance, it's fast tracked through the waiver system, and then hopefully things will move along. So the other state agency I mentioned is DOORS, Division of Rehab Services. Their main service is what they call VR services. They assist with employment for persons with disabilities that affects your ability to maintain gainful employment. So they serve any disability, mental health, any criteria. If you get Social Security benefits, you're automatically eligible for DOORS because you're already determined disabled to work. So DOORS, but there's different priorities. A new thing this year is something called, there is a waiting list. You should apply for VR services at age 18, especially if you leave school and aren't eligible for TY services until you're 21. DOORS might be your only option. DOORS might pay for a training program or help you with a job.
Provides assessments for accommodations.
And really good with stuff like some of the folks you folks might need. Some, like we have a woman who's totally blind, and she has, for her work, she has a number of different things like the JAWS software for her work and things like that that DOORS paid for. New, the last couple of years, it's not actually new money, but DOORS has some guidance that they have to use 15% of their budget for kids under 21. So they developed what they call a pre-ETS program, pre-employment training. I'm not sure what they all mean, but anybody age 14 to 21, as long as you're still in school and have an IEP or a 504 plan, is that right? 504 is what they call it. Yeah. Okay, then you're eligible. And it's short-term services. There's 5 or 6 areas. There's like advocacy, there's internships, career exploration. It's kind of work readiness kind of stuff. And you could do it like some people do it during the summer. Some people do it like a couple days a week. There's different programs. The ARC has a number of programs. There's different agencies. It's relatively new, so new agencies are coming up and developing new programs and working with schools and things. But there's no waiting list for that. If you meet the criteria, still in school, are interested in things, you call DOORS. You mentioned pre-ETS, and they don't have to do the normal eligibility. You have your IEP. They'll process it and can talk to you about referring you to a pre-ETS program.
we have an independent camp in the summer for
Okay.
transitioning kids, and part of it is you have to apply for pre-eds.
Good. Okay.
Yeah,
Exactly.
It's a job skill kind of independent program.
That's great. Yeah. And that's a great new thing was never around before. You know, the doors didn't do much until they exited school, and now they have a whole new program. So that's great. So there's a lot of changes going on with DDA services. Most of this is the federal government initiated, the Center for Medicaid, because Medicaid is who reimburses Maryland 50% of the cost. So they have all their own rules. So they're making Maryland's on board with it being an employment first state. So they're supposed to look at employment options first, but there's a lot of changes. So before, a lot of families wanted a day program for the son or daughter. They felt it was safe. It was the most like school. They were there every day, Monday through Friday. There was often transportation provided. That's changed dramatically. So they're no longer center-based. So ARC had 6 centers maybe around Baltimore City and Baltimore County. Lots of folks would come there every day, just like school, have a variety of activities. Art teachers would come in, the different programs in the center. That's not the way it works anymore. The activities are supposed to be in the community. So folks come into our centers, 9 o'clock, say, and then by 10 o'clock, they're getting all bands with groups and going down in the community. So they're taking an art class, but they're going to community college to take the art class. They're going to an art teacher in the community. They're doing things like that in the community. It presents some problems for some people with transportation, or if they're having a behavioral incident or a bad day, or they need toileting help, or so it's not as, I mean, it's in theory, it's a great thing. There's a lot of issues with transportation and a lot of issues, especially for certain people who don't do well in the small groups. So there's a lot of issues with that and working out. And this is all brand new. It's going to be in effect July 1st. So everybody that's still in school, it's going to affect them. So all the agencies, all the providers are in transition mode right now, coming up with these new programs. I mean, all of our centers are pretty much community-based now. Some agencies have done away with the centers altogether. People are meeting in the community at the library and then going out from there. So it's a new thing. So right now, if somebody's coming to service, they're really not talking just about meaningful day. They're going to talk to you about smaller, large groups. Can they go out in a smaller, large group? Small group, I think, is 5 or fewer people. Large group is 10. I don't think there's a lot of people that are going to be able to go out in a group of 1 to 10 and be safe and be able to use the bathroom themselves and cross streets and all those
There's
kinds
a
of
lot of support though, right?
Well, that's the idea. If you're 1 to 10, it's going to be 1 staff person to 10 people. That's not a lot of support.
Oh.
Small group would be 1 to 5.
Yeah, so they have to be much more independent to do 1 to 10.
Yeah. We're trying to figure this out. It's a challenge right now. So some people that have a lot of needs hopefully would have a 1-to-1, and then they could go out with the 1 to 10 group, but they'd have their own 1-to-1.
Okay.
So if they need help
Like
with the behavioral stuff, yeah. So people are trying to figure this out. So if your son or daughter is graduating this year and you're talking to providers and they sound a little confused or don't know what we're talking about, it's because DDA is changing the rules daily. You know, every day we hear something new. So don't blame the providers, blame the federal government and DDA, and they're pushing this out before everything's in place and guidelines. So it's a work in progress. So just understand that. Most providers no longer provide transportation. So that's a big deal for a lot of students. So most of our folks use mobility. So mobility is the paratransit, right? It's like a cab or a bus. It's not reliable, though it's much better when you're what they call a regular rider. You're going to the same place every day. So if you're going to show up at the ARC at 9 o'clock every day and get picked up at 3, they're pretty good.
Yes.
They're maybe not the first couple of weeks because they're squeezing you in, but once they get you, you're on their schedule. But if you're going to a doctor's appointment and it's 1 day, you might wait 2 hours. It's terrible. Yeah. So they've been sued. They've got a new provider. They're trying to work it out, but
every county is very similar.
Yeah. So mobility is not for everybody. That's one of the problems, is that you have to live within 3/4 of a mile of a bus line because it's supposed to replace people. It's for people who cannot use public transportation but otherwise would. So if you live 2 miles off the bus line, you're not eligible for mobility. Now you can get around it some way. We have one guy who did live in the county, and the parents drop him off at Dunkin' Donuts, and he has a coffee and a donut in the morning, and he gets picked up for work to go there and drop back off there, and they pick him up. So they don't take him all the way downtown where he works, but that's a limitation. And then a lot of families are not comfortable with their son or daughter, especially if they're nonverbal, or they, putting them on it's like to put them in a cab. Now mobility is a lot better. They will walk the person to the door,
yes,
which they didn't used to do that. They used to drop them off and the person be wandering around, not know where they go. Now they'll walk them to where they're supposed to be, so that's good.
Yes.
So you should apply for mobility if you think your son or daughter could be able to do that before they exit school. That's a good thing. And then meaningful pay would be no paid employment. That's that would. So employment, there's a lot of changes in employment too, starting effective July. The ARC has a lot of crews and enclaves, which we have a big landscape department, lots of like janitorial and policing crews, where people make good money, minimum wage. Some of them work, a lot of them work full time. DDA does not consider them integrated enough. Integrated said, even though they're out in the community doing the work, you know, they're at people's houses and businesses mowing the lawns, because it's a segregated crew. You know, it's like 4 folks with disabilities and a crew and a supervisor. That's not acceptable to the new guidelines. So that's going to put a lot of people out of work, because they're going to say, DDA says, get those folks jobs with an independent landscaper. But those folks are not going to be as tolerant with training them. Yeah, or when they curse them out because they have a disability or brain injury or whatever, or they, you know, walk off the job, you know, and they get, you know, we understand they have a disability, so we work with them. So
Right.
That's going to be a challenge.
They're trying to sabotage.
We had hundreds of people probably, and we still have people in landscaping and janitorial stuff that's not segregated. That is segregated. We had a lot of other contracts with businesses that were segregated, and I mean, I'd say a couple hundred people lost their job because we can't operate them anymore, and they're not independent enough to work on their own without somebody around keeping an eye on them. You know, there's a whole group of people that should be working.
It's a great experience for them.
They don't need a they don't need a one-to-one, but they need somebody around to kind of refocus them or whatever. So that's a challenge too. Employment now must be 4 hours a day to be considered employment. Supported employment used to be a general thing. They went in the day program or supported employment. That was a general category of funding, and we would do everything from job development, the job coaching once you're on the job, you know, all the things associated with that would all fall under one bucket. Now there's lots of different buckets. So there's job development bucket, and then there's a funding for that. They're all like milestones or short range, like 3 months you can have career discovery and exploration. And then that's not employment yet because they're not working, so they get paid for 3 months. But then if they get a job, then you have to put them in a job coaching bucket or intensive job coaching or a follow along if they're pretty independent. So it's a lot of changes. A lot of things, again, a lot of things aren't in place yet. But we're working through it. We're moving forward to be ready to do this July 1st. So a lot of changes. So the ARC employment, so I mentioned we have a lot of crews and enclaves, which are kind of fading out. I know, and we're not sure. We're still fighting with them that we can keep some of our crews that are working in the community. That's what we're hoping. We have a lot of people that work at Social Security Administration, and they make $18 an hour, and they do groundskeeping on the mulching and planting stuff. But they're on a crew of like 5 people with disabilities and a supervisor from the ARC. Even though they're out in the community with on the grounds of Social Security, DDA says that's not integrated enough. So we're fighting that piece, but we haven't gotten final word yet. They're telling us no, but we're seeing. But the federal people that award the contracts to people, I call set-aside contracts, but like they're like contracts. They give you the contract. Minorities and disabilities can apply for the contract. They try to. That's part of there's a whole arm of the government that gives those contracts out to minorities and disabilities, but then the other arm of the government is saying that's not integrated enough, you can't do it. So catch-22. The ARC has a couple of unique programs besides just regular, we work with people with their abilities and needs to find them a job that they can do and provide the support on the job. That's like traditional supported employment. They have a job coach who go with them, but the goal is that the job coach fades away. Right. And there's some natural supports on the job, but they're never gone completely. They check in periodically, or if there's a problem or you get a new boss and they want to change your duties or have new expectations, we come back in and work with them to work with you to learn the job again. ARC has a couple of unique programs. We have something called Project Search, which is a 10-month internship program. There's actually 3 Project Searches. There's one at University Hospital and University Downtown, but that's only for Baltimore City school students in their final year of school. So when they're 20, 21. But then we have 2 adult programs. One is at Union Memorial Hospital and one is at Northwest Hospital. And it's just like another school year. It starts in the end of August or September, beginning of September, and there's a graduation in May or June. And there's a community college instructor there who does a class in the morning. Not academics as much, more like work-related stuff, soft work skills, might be academics that are work geared towards the job. If they do an hour in the morning, and then the idea is they go through 3 internships somewhere in the hospital over the course of the 10 months. And hospitals have all kind of jobs. So from like Union Memorial, it's bigger, much bigger program, but we have people that are sterilizing the hospital instruments, or copying like your x-rays on the discs for you, or delivering pharmaceuticals around the hospital. There's also people that work in the cafeteria or work in different things. So it's a good chance to try some different jobs that maybe you haven't even thought of. And the hope is that you get hired. You make a good impression in one of the departments you work in, and the hope is that you get hired on, and lots of the folks do. If you don't get hired on, at least you got some experience, figured out some things you like or don't like, and then we still work with you as supported employment after that. So that's a 10-month thing. And then we have a short-term internship program called Career Catalyst, which is not like a facility-based. It's a 16-week internship. There's a 2-week classroom work at the very beginning of it. And then we have a lot of business partners, like Breakview Retirement Community and Comic Book Store and Marshalls and TJ Maxx, a bunch of different kind of variety of things. And like the first 6 weeks, it's kind of an assessment period. You go on the internship and they try you different jobs, see what you're good at, how well you do, that sort of thing. There's job coaches there to help you learn the job, but that's really an assessment period. And then the second 8 weeks, they develop an individualized internship for you in something using your skills that hopefully is going to lead to a job. And it's a way to get your foot in the door. And only 4 to 6 folks go through that program at any one time. It starts every 3 or 4 months. And the idea is that you make a good impression, you show what you do, you get hired. And I'd say probably more than half get hired by one of the jobs. But then if you don't, we work with you when finding another job or another internship. So,
Okay.
So just a couple of unique things that the ARC has. It's really not we're winding down here. So other DDA services. So once it's in, it's hard to get services. That's what I mentioned. So most people are going to become eligible. Now, if you're on the waiting list for a few years, you might get a call saying you're eligible for the family support waiver or the community support waiver, and the service coordinator would meet with you to talk about what you might be able to get. But most people are going to still getting the services as a transition youth at age 21. Once you're in service, once you're in the waiver and getting services in the waiver, let me just say this. The DDA waiver is not a way to get services like the autism waiver, right? You're on the waiting list for the autism waiver. Now you're in the autism waiver. You can get all kinds of things. The DDA waiver doesn't work that way. You have to be eligible for the services some other way, and then they put you in the waiver.
Okay.
Right? So that's why you have to be eligible as a transition youth. Being eligible for the waiver is just part of the process. You have to be eligible, but you're eligible for funding as a transition youth because that's the pot of money that is set aside for students graduating. Being in the waiver is just kind of part of that process. So because you're in the waiver doesn't mean you get anything. But once you're getting services like day services from the DDA waiver, it's easier to get additional services.
Okay.
You have your foot in the door, you can request some additional services. You still have to justify the need, but you can get some things like respite, some limited personal support, some AT stuff without. Well, again, it's going to depend on the year and how much funding DDA has. But in recent years, the economy's been good. People have been able to get some additional services without the mother dying or going to a nursing home like it used to be. So the other things you can get, residential or shared living. That's the hardest one to get because it's the most expensive. But the ARC has about 80 homes around Baltimore City and Baltimore County. That residential services generally are 3 people share a home and their staff there. So that's what residential living is. There's still a few group homes in Maryland where there's larger homes, but you can't open a new group home, but the grandfathered in. The ARC doesn't have any, but some other agencies do. But so generally it's a house like any other house in the community. 3 people live there. We either own it or rent it. And then there's the staff there to support the needs of the folks that live there. Some people are very independent, have their own key, come and go as they want. Other people, need a lot of help. So it's a whole range. And then shared living is more like adult foster care. That's a brand new thing that's just coming into place with this new waiver stuff. I guess as opposed to foster care, I don't completely understand what you can bill for, but I think like the idea is that in exchange for reduced rent, or if I own a house and I have a disability, I might let you live there for either reduced rent or free rent. You provide some sort of support and safety net type services, and I think you can get a stipend for providing a limited number of services.
Okay.
So that's what shared living is. Personal support, lots of folks, personal supports means an individual person will work with you on independent living skills or community integration. One change that it doesn't do, you cannot do personal care stuff anymore. in the past, personal sports could be personal care, could be a mix of things. So now there's a new waiver. So if somebody has a health or personal care kind of need, there's another service called Community First Choice, which they rolled in a whole bunch of other Medicaid waivers that were more medically oriented, and they're under that. So, but they separated the DDA waiver. So under DDA can no longer pay for somebody to help with bathing or dressing, or those sort of things. So if you get personal sports through the ARC, we can't do that. You might be able to get a combination. Maybe the aide from the Community First Choice would come in the morning and help you get bathed and dressed and ready for the day. And then our person would take you out shopping for groceries or teaching independent living skills, that sort of thing. Personal sports can be like community integration stuff. Lots of folks live with their family and they say, well, we have trouble getting around, we're getting older or whatever reason, or he just doesn't want to do stuff with us. We're all, so they can just community integration is like, taking them to an art class, taking them to a ball game, helping them meet people, develop some natural sports in the community. So personal supports is a good thing that's been available. Respite and camp, DDA's been terrific about funding that for families now. Once you're in the waiver, people have been able to get some respite, which is a break for the caregiver, or get DDA to pay for the camp that they attend every summer. I can't promise that that'll stay if the economy goes bad and it gets cut back, but that's been really good without really justifying an urgent need. You could just say they really would like to have it, and DDA's been approving it. AT services, environmental modifications, behavioral support, all those things are new services that are available through the community support waiver or under the other waiver starting this summer. Funding, over 21 students with disabilities are eligible to receive a wide range of educational. So it's just my plug that when they're in school, lots of services are guaranteed, right? There's federal laws that say they need to have an appropriate education, and if they need AT, they're going to get it. If they need OT, they're going to get it. Once they turn 21, there's no guarantee for anything. Nothing is mandated. The state and DDA allocates funding only based on how much money is available in the budget. Some years when the budget is tight and there's they got to cut the budget, DDA gets cut, and there's no emergency services. There's going to be some years that there's going to be no additional respite, but unless you can make the case urgently that the mother is having brain surgery and needs respite for a month or whatever, that used to be the way. 10 years ago, that's how you got services. It had to be a desperate situation because the economy was bad and the state didn't have much money. So don't assume that any of these things are mandated for you. Hopefully, the economy still good this year. The next couple of years, hopefully, will still be the funding that we hope will be there. But the ARC is down in Annapolis every spring, every February, advocating for disability funding to be in the services. And if you have a kid with a disability, I would urge you to do the same. You could sign up to the ARC newsletter. If you go on our website, which is thearcbaltimore.org, you can sign up there's 4 different newsletters. One's on employment and one's on just family and children's services. You sign up for any one you want. But there is one strictly on advocacy, and it will give you what's going on in the legislature. Are they talking about cutting transition youth fundings or whatever? And you can write your local legislator or your state representative. I'd encourage you to do that. The ARC also has a couple of things which will be on our website that you don't have to be DDA funded for, like we have parent support groups. We have 2 moms groups, one for kids out of school and one for kids in school that meets once a month. We have a dads group that meets the 4th Thursday of the month at the ARC in Towson. So they're open and free to anyone. So if you go out, we have a pretty good website that has other resources outside the ARC, has information on DDA, lots of stuff like that. I'd encourage you to look it up. If anybody has any questions, my contact information is on the ARC website. They can call me. Best way to get me is email. I'm not in the office that much, but you can call me too. I'll get back to you eventually. I would get started. If you have a kid, son or daughter who's going to be is eligible, get started with the process.
Great. This is a lot of great information. I really appreciate it.
Right.
You're good?
We're good.
All right. Thank you, Bob.
All right.